Hey folks, good day to you. VM Explorer here, and in today's session with building a nested lab on Workstation 17, we're calling this Part 8B, more on networking. This was actually done because a few folks had given me a few comments saying, hey, look, your last session 8 was a little short on networking and we're confused, we don't know what to do. You just kind of showed us a few things, but didn't really show us how to do it. So we created 8B just to try to show you how to set up VDS, set up those port groups, and connect those hosts to VDS, and that's what this session's all about. So just kind of the series agenda. I've added 8B in here, more on networking for us to learn a bit more about it. We're still kind of doing that vSAN 8 cluster, though in the lab you're going to see that the lab is advanced. I'm making this 8B after I've completed the whole series, right? So it's the lab is ahead. So I've had to make a few adjustments to actually make this video, and you'll see that coming up here. But we're focused on networking. All right, so some more on networking. So this one we've seen this plan. This is our plan that we've kind of developed. Each host with 6, basically network adapters, right? Physical adapters. And we're going to set up 2 adapters per line here. So even though it's only showing, one orange or one green or one purple, we're actually going to set up 2 adapters per host connected into each of these different networks, right? So the workstation configurations over here. So the first 2 network adapters you have, like, NIC 0 and NIC 1, are on VM10, 2 and 3 are on 11, and 4 and 5 are on 13, a total of 6, 0 through 5, right? So we set those up. That's already been done. We did that many moons ago in some of the early parts. What we're focused on now is just getting these guys, these port groups established, a virtual distributed switch established, and getting our hosts migrated and set up. And that's what we're going to be doing today in this session. All right, so let's ask a few questions though first before we actually go and do this. Let's kind of plan this out a little bit, right? How will your port groups align to your VDS? In our example of what we're trying to do, we're creating 3 port groups to get started. ESXi management, which is our management network to control the ESXi hosts. Management VMs, which rides on the same port group. vSAN traffic, and then everything else, which is the fault-tolerant vMotion and replication. We may need to add other port groups later for VMs and things like that, but that's outside the scope of what we're trying to accomplish in this lab. Right now, we're just going to get the management and the management VM set up, vSAN traffic, and the FT port groups, which these 3 port groups I have listed here. So how many VDS uplinks will I need? Well, that answer is 6. So what you do is when you create the VDS, we're going to say how many uplinks we want, which are 6. When we add the hosts, we'll then align the physical or kind of their virtual NICs, right? Those nested NICs into the VDS uplinks, and they all line up. And you'll see that here in the lab in just a minute. Okay. So where do my VDS uplinks go to, right? Great question. So basically, you're just trying to align VDS to a specific host. Now, one host might have, and this is outside of what we're doing here a little bit, just to kind of explain VDS a little bit. One host might have 4 NICs. One host might have 8 NICs, right? So what you got to do is when you add those hosts, you got to say, okay, I know this host has 4 physical NICs. I'm going to use these 2 NICs for this type of traffic and these 2 NICs for that type of traffic. Okay, you might have to align those. Whereas another host might have 8 physical NICs. Well, your uplink only has 6, and that's okay. Maybe those 2 extra NICs are used for something else, like into a VSS, or we're using it for something different. The point is when you introduce your host into a VDS, you align the destination of where those physical NICs are going to the correct uplink number. And so let's get into lab. This will make a little bit more sense when we kind of lay it out and get it all going. All right, so let's hop right to it. Now, like I've said, this is already done. You're going to see this in part 9 coming up here. We do performance benchmarking and testing. So I'm not going to mess too much with these 3. The process is still the same, okay? So what I've done is I've created just a demo host just to show you the process of doing this. So let's go into networking. Okay, and we can already see that nested everything is already here, and we've seen this before, right? We actually kind of showed this a little bit, but I didn't show how to set it up. So I'm not going to add my host, the demo host, to this one. I'm going to create a new VDS, and this is what you would do, is you would create a new VDS called Nested Everything. You'd create 3 port groups that are listed here like these 3 are, and you'd move forward. I'm going to show you those steps just with a little bit of different naming convention. All right, so let's go in, and let's say new VDS, or distributed switch, sorry. Let's give it a name, and we're just going to call this demo switch. Okay. ESXIO 80. How many uplinks? 6, because we're going to match what we have in our hosts. No other changes needed. We don't need it to create a default port group. And click finish. Okay. There's our demo VDS. Now, if you notice something, there's no hosts attached yet. We haven't added anything yet. We don't want to yet. First thing we want to do is get these port groups set up similar to what we have here. So let's go in and say new distributed port group. Okay, this is going to be our first one. So we can call this demo MGT VMs, which is similar to what we have down there. Okay, next. Okay, no changes here. Next, finish. Okay, let's get our next one set up, and then we're going to go back and configure these. Next one, demo dash ft dash vmo dash rpo. And this will all make sense here in just a little bit. Let's get this one going. Okay, finish, and then our last one. This one's for vSAN. So demo dash vSAN ESA, we'll call it. Now, of course, when you set up yours, follow this naming convention I have below here. All right, so now let's work with FT and vMotion. So let's go in. We're going to edit its settings. Okay, let's look at teaming and failover. And now this is where we need to know where our links go. In this case, teaming and failover for FT are 5 and 6. So let's move 1 through 4 down, down, down. We don't want them as standby. We want them as unused uplinks. The other change I make is I move to routing based on NIC load, and this one's done. Now I do the same for my management. Teaming and failover. This one's going to be uplinks 1 and 2. So we'll get 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to move these down. Okay, and then finally ESA, edit settings, teaming and failover. Make sure that's right. 3 and 4. So we got 1, 2, 5, and 6. So trick here is move these down first. Then get 5 and 6, move them down as a chunk. Okay. Let me go back and just double check this one. I think I missed a setting, but let me double check. Yeah, I did. Route based on physical NIC load. Done. Okay. So now our port groups are set up. We don't have any hosts attached yet. We just have set up our port groups. That's what we wanted to accomplish here. So now when that's ready, now we need to import our first host. So let's go ahead and say add host. Okay. We're going to add a host here. Next. We're going to select our host. And now we need to align its physical NICs to the assigned uplink. All right. So before, what we decided to do was use VMNIC 0 and 1 for management, right? 2 and 3 would be for vSAN traffic, and 4 and 5 for our fault tolerance replication and everything else. So we just literally have to go down the links here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so now this host is aligned, and that's what I was saying. Depending on the type of your host, and again, this is outside the scope of what we're accomplishing here. if you're doing something in production or messing around with other things. When you bring your host in, it'll tell you how many VNICs it has. It's up to you to align these properly. Maybe the host you're aligning, these two right here, really need to be on 5 and 6 because that's how things you want to connect it that way, right? That could be. It just depends on what you're trying to do. However, my rule of thumb is the more things that are the same in virtualization, the better they work. So if I'm going to add a host into a cluster, you better believe that VNIC 0 through 5 are all going to be the same on every single host. It just makes it so much easier to work with versus trying to do a mix match of hosts and things of that nature. All right, so back to what we're doing. 1 through 6, we're good to go. Okay, now we need to assign a port group. This is VMK0. It recognizes that it has that right now set up. What we need to do is tell it where it needs to go. That's this port group right here, which is management. So we click on assign, next, and now we allow it to finish up. Okay, if we look down in recent tasks, we can see it's updated it. Okay, let's get that out of the way. When we look at the host configuration, we can now see that it's part of this as well. And if we go look at the actual host in our inventory and we go down to virtual switches, we can see right here that uplink 1 and 2 are mapped to this VM kernel port. We're good to go. All right, now, what else do we need to do? Well, we need to add in, make VM kernel ports for the other two, right? Now, we could have made these VM kernel ports first and then did the migration. It would have brought it all in for us really nice, right? So when it was still in a standard switch mode, I made our management network. I could have made the vSAN network, and I could have made FT. I could have done it that way. And when I added the host to the VDS, it would have said, hey, where do you want to assign these to? And it would have been done in one shot. But I didn't do it that way, right? So now I need to add my VM kernel ports here. So if we go in here and we say add networking, we can set it up this way. So VM kernel, okay? And we're going to do the fault tolerant vMotion one, basically everything else, so to speak, right? So I choose everything here, except for vSAN, and we don't care about those. Okay? Uncheck management, sorry. Those are the ones I want to check. This is basically everything else. Okay, I need to add an IP address to it. So in this case, this one's going to be 10.0.13.104 for this particular host. And finish. And the port group should appear right there. So now when I click on this port group, you can see it's mapped to 5 and 6. Done. Add networking. VM kernel adapter. This time we're doing the vSAN one. Okay, that's fine on the name. All we want to do is check vSAN here. Next. Put our IP address. And we'll change that just a little bit. 13.104. Done. Everything is good. Next. Finish. All right, so we got a little error here. Let's see what we did wrong. So it looks like it's unable to, address not available. Okay, so maybe I made a typo somewhere on a duplicate to IP address. So let's take a different look at this real quick. vSAN should be 11.104, not 13.104. That's where I made the mistake. 13.104 was right here. So that's my mistake. Not an error. Okay, but it's good that it checks that. So let's do it again. And there it is. So now that I corrected my mistake, the vSAN is ready to go. So there's our networking setup for vSAN. So we've got everything ready to go on this host. Now, as you go through and you do your other 3 hosts, what I might recommend you do is go into the VSS level and set up these port groups ahead of time. You can do it that way if you want, totally up to you, or you can do it the way that I just showed you. So folks, that's what I had for you today. Just a real quick video on how to do VDS and get these set up. And that should be able to help you a little bit get past that little roadblock where I wasn't showing enough detail and actually create your, go back to part 8, finish creating your ESA cluster and actually getting it up and running. Please leave comments below. That's why they're so important. When you do, I understand what I'm missing in my videos and I can make a correction, make an extra video just to try to help you guys out. I really appreciate the folks that stood up and said, hey, Matt, we're calling you out. All right. Your networking area is a little bit light. We need more information. Thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. Folks, have a great day. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me feedback in those comments section. Take care, everyone.